Black Cat Lounge is sponsored by Beacon, a home for those who have a passion for filmmaking and the unusual. The Haunted Hinsdale House. Those who walk there do not walk alone. Paraware, apparel for the action-seeking paranormal investigator. Dragonfly art and soul for all of your magical, metaphysical, and spiritual needs. Mystery Control, your go-to feed for science, magic, true crime, the paranormal, and so much more. Para-Niagara, one of the top rated destinations in Western New York. The Black Cat Lounge is part of the Paraflix Entertainment Network. Everybody, Tim Shaw here, and we got a great show for you tonight. I've been wanting to put this guy on my show for I don't know how long. I keep saying every time I run into him, I'd say, I need you on my show. I want you on my show. And then other things come in the way. The bookings get crazy, and I never do it. So today I am thrilled. I am so thrilled that he finally said, yes, come on I will come on your show. And it's really neat because there are certain parts of the different fields in which we all are a part of that I don't want to say terrify me, but really makes me a little uneasy. So we're going to talk about that. And, and I'll tell you what it is. It's alien abduction. It's the loss of time. It's a lot of that's kind of thing that really just kind of, I've seen ghosts. I've been scratched. I've been knocked down. That does not bother me. But for some reason, this is something that really kind of pushes the envelope. So I want to explore that a little bit tonight. And I got to tell you what, our guest tonight is, he's the state director of the Michigan chapter of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. He's been doing it since 2004. He's an active researcher, which I love, investigating otherworldly phenomena. He's an experiencer. That's why I have him on the show. He's an experiencer. I want to pick his brain about this. And he's been trying to make sense of what has happened to him since childhood. It's amazing. His books are really great. He's the author of the autobiographical Experiencer, Raised in Two Worlds, and Experiencer, Two Worlds Collide. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. His experiences have been featured on the sci-fi doc Abduction Diaries, also in Abducted by Aliens, UFO Encounters of the Fourth Time, and the ABC news special UFO Seeing is Believing. Everybody, please welcome someone who I really respect, this guy, Mr. Bill. And I'm taking my time to say your name, Bill Konkolesky. I've got to make sure I get the N in there. Was I close, Bill? Was I close?
Yeah, right on.
All right. I feel good about that. Because I explained off air that I murder everybody's name, and I respect you, Bill, so much that I want to make sure that I got it right this time without trying, without getting crazy with it. Bill, you know what really impresses me is that it's almost like a flap with you, and I really think this is interesting because paranormal and ufology and everything else, it seems that all of these modalities should be interconnected. They should be interconnected, yet they're not. Paranormal investigators, we're just kind of talking about it. Paranormal investigators, will not cross the line into anything that happens to do with ET studies. You have cryptozoologists out there who may cross the line into cryptozoology, but in many cases, they won't go into the paranormal. Why do you think that is, Bill?
Well, there's a lot that actually goes into that. There could be some folks that are just into the cryptid thing and think that they understand their phenomena from their unique perspective. Same goes with UFOs or the people that look into hauntings and things like that. But I find that there are two things that are true that about this. One is that the phenomena do often overlap. People who have UFO sightings are known to have poltergeist activity. I've seen ghosts. I've had UFO encounters. Nothing that I would call cryptid per se, but there is some overlap. But the thing about it is that um, if you, depending on how far you go down the rabbit hole, you can say, okay, this is elements of one unified phenomena.
Mm-hmm.
But unless you give something a name, you can't talk about it. Alien's an entity, a Bigfoot's an entity, a ghost is an entity. But unless you give them those names of alien, Bigfoot, ghost, then if you are unable to hang a name on them, you're unable to talk about the phenomena. Even
True.
though an apparition that you see might be extraterrestrial, might be a ghost, maybe even cryptid, whatever. But, and I'm speaking on a very basic level about it, meaning
Mm-hmm.
that I'm able to talk about it. But if you start to see everything as an overlap, as a big melting pot of phenomena, you lose the language to be able to describe what you're seeing, to be able to investigate it, be able to talk about it with others. So there's a confusion, a complication that comes with blending the phenomena too much together, even though there is very likely more than overlap. There is, just different ways of looking at the same phenomena.
Exactly. Because now, oftentimes, I run into people who have that overlap in so many different ways. And I mean, one of the classic, and it's not, I hesitate to call it a book because it's just more of a record of things that went on, is Stan Gordon's, uh, his record of UFO and Bigfoot sightings, how they
Hmm.
all interconnect, and so many of them overlap on those certain dates, or they kind of go and walk hand in hand, such as, like, I think the 1966 sighting at Presque Isle Beach 6 in Pennsylvania. So I kind of like, I'm a person that believes that maybe we should be we should be a little bit more fluid in our interests, and we should be able to go out there and just kind of accept more. So
So,
I also agree 100%. If you need the terminology, you
mhm.
need that terminology in order to describe it. So I guess it's good to be able to go down the rabbit hole and put blinders on too a little bit.
Yeah. So, to be clear, a great value of this fluidity, as you say, is from the investigator's perspective. When
Right.
you're looking at things, if you hang a name on it, you may be blocking out data. You might be saying, "Oh, alien," and therefore you might not be thinking of other paranormal phenomena by simply naming things. So there is that um, risk of oversimplifying things so you don't bring in data. But there is another side of this that joins phenomena together, and that is from a person who claims they know the answers and is sometimes of say like a spiritualist bent or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
that puts names on things that maybe aren't a good fit, or maybe they've just decided to look at things in their own way and it makes them feel good and they want to share that and invite people on board to look at the unified phenomena from their perspective and feel a certain way about it. I'm saying, from an investigator's standpoint, it's best to be open-minded and try to look at things as best as possible. There was a friend of mine who passed a year ago, Chris Bailey. He ran a ghost hunting group, Grimstone, and one thing
Mm-hmm.
that he and I were doing for a while is he would bring a bunch of ghost reports, and I would bring a bunch of contact reports that each of us, depending on how you looked at it, could have been actually construed as, his ghost report. I looked at it and say, yeah, people report alien reports just like this, and vice versa. He was showing me these ghosts, and I was showing him alien reports, and he's like, yeah, that's an apparition. And so, yeah, there was only a finite number of those, but every year we made it a tradition that we would meet up and share those stories that could, depending on who the leader was that ended up there, they would have interpreted it differently.
I think that's interesting. I really do, because so many times I do believe that people within the fields get myopic, and they don't go and they won't open up enough in order to accept something else. Because I do know people in the paranormal field that will not accept anything to do with UFOs, because automatically they believe that it's spirit, or those that have more of a Christian bend to them, they're demonic and or angelic or whatever, depending on your traditions. So, but anyway, okay, the next question I have for you, and it's something that I love to ask. When I was growing up, Bill, UFOs were nut and bolt machines, spaceships, that sort of thing. I'm a child born in 57. I'm a child of the space age. And yet that never made sense to me. It never made sense to me to do that, that something like this would have been possible. Now we have more of a interdimensional type bend to it. What's your opinion on that? Because I know people here in New York State, in the Hudson River Valley, they see so much. They see so many unidentified aerial phenomena. They see so much of it there, and they just seem to vanish. They seem to just kind of appear. And if in a spiritual sense, it's like A port and D ports, that sort of thing. What's your opinion on that? Because I'm so thrilled that you're here, because I get a chance to ask somebody in the know about this.
Well, one thing that makes it a challenge is that if these beings who are visiting are of an older civilization, you just look at how far people have come in 100 years. Like 100 years ago, in 1926, if you ask someone, say, would you believe that in 100 years the biggest challenge is that people think that robots are going to take over? And so I'm just saying that, like, give it another 100 years or 200 years or even 1,000 years. Say some of these visiting civilizations are even 1,000,000 years older than ours.
Right.
Then what they could do is it's limitless. And when you try to interpret what you're seeing, we have no words for it, much in the same way as if you gave a cell phone to somebody in the Middle Ages.
True.
So yeah, it's hard to say based upon what you see, but yeah, some really strange things happen. One of the sightings that happened in Michigan, March 8th, 1994, is sort of a big date for us. There were hundreds of witnesses, chiefly on the west side of the state, and this family of 4 and a police officer were watching this UFO across the street, and then whoop, split into 5. I'm like, how does that happen? How does a single craft split into 5 independent vehicles, and then they all go their separate ways?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's interesting now, let me ask you about the flaps. Why do you think they occur? Because I know here in Western New York, where I live, and in the southern tier of New York State, I mean, I witnessed what I believe was a UAP, because of the fact that originally I thought it was a satellite, and then it came lower and lower, and then it went back up, and then it went in a straight pattern, and then it did zigzag and then disappeared. Why do you think that these flaps actually occur? It seems as if there's just not a single sighting in most cases. It's multiple sightings all at once.
So it would seem, the way that we would look at it from our own perspective, maybe it's like, just essentially like a cruise ship parked outside the planet, and all of the, aliens on board went out on their excursion, and then the cruise ship flew away. So I think that there might be some logistics involved in getting um, a large number of craft possibly
Hmm.
over for a limited amount of time. And that's just spitballing. That's just, because otherwise, when I joined MUFON in 93 and that thing in 1994 that I just talked about happened, I thought, oh my gosh, is it always going to be like this? And, 30 years later, not so much. But
Right. Right.
but it did happen, and you look at other places like Stephenville, Hudson Valley, um,
Right.
Belgium, some of the big ongoing waves, and then they dry up, and then things go back to normal. Yeah, it is mysterious, and I think the biggest thing to do as an investigator is to admit, I have no idea.
See, you know what? I'm thankful that you say that, because I get criticized for when people ask me about certain things that have happened in their house or whatever, and I said I don't have an explanation. There is, maybe when, again, like you said, 100, 200 years from now, maybe we'll have explanations. At this point, no. And it's better to be honest with it than to go and make up some story and later be proved totally wrong. So
Mhm.
I appreciate that. Now,
And I understand the currency in probably every aspect of paranormal investigation. Somebody that comes out with a certainty, say, "I've
yes,
got it figured out. This is
yeah,
it." Um, they get the spotlight. They get all the attention,
hmm,
because they've got a confidence, they've got an answer, and people will tune in for the 15 minutes or so that they're in the spotlight, and then move on. But I mean, if you really want some endurance in the game, you just always have to keep an open mind.
exactly. And that's something that I always tell everybody. You know what? Guys like me, I've been blessed. I've had my 15 minutes of fame here and there, and I'm happy. But you don't go out and seek it. And that's what's so important about it. Just be honest. And if you're a good investigator, it's always better to be a researcher behind the camera than the guy who's wearing pancake makeup in front of the camera. And you know that as well as I do, Bill.
Mhm.
That's the curse of what we do. Now, I wanted to ask you, in your youth, when you were young, you had paranormal experiences, and did they happen before you had this abduction experience, or did it happen like simultaneously, like one kind of fed into the other?
Well, my very first memory in life at age 2 is a little gray guy coming in my room and
Wow.
staring down at me in my crib. And it was late at night, but I wasn't asleep yet. I screamed for my parents. My mom told me to go back to sleep, and I hadn't even fallen asleep yet. And the thing just regarded me, just looked down at me for, however long it was, and then left the room. And that, so for something like that to have been burned in my memory at that time, it wasn't a memory that came back several years later, like, oh yeah, I remember what happened when I was 2. It happened, and I never forgot it. And then as I would continue to have experiences, um, for age 4, age 7, 9, and 10, and lots of memories in my teens of the UFO stuff. Other weird stuff was happening in my household as well. I have 4 older brothers, um, and the phenomena in general, I would say, tends to run on my mom's side of the family. My cousins have had stuff happen. My mom, my grandparents
Oh,
talk
this
about
is
things,
interesting.
and so what's really weird is amongst my brothers, my 2 oldest brothers, the 3 of us could go toe to toe in a crazy story contest. And then the next 2 brothers between them, 0 paranormal experiences. 0. And that always just really tripped me out. Like, how come, me and my 2 oldest brothers, but not the next 2 brothers? Why did it skip like that? But yeah, there's been ghost sightings. Like, we used to have this thing where there was this plant in my basement that would shake occasionally and look like its leaves were blowing in the wind when there was no breeze in the room or anything like that. And my oldest brother saw a spirit of somebody he said looked like a Native American in his room. My second oldest brother, he was really good at doing out of body stuff. I
Hmm.
was mildly successful at it, nowhere near as good as he was. Just, yeah, it just pretty much ran the gamut, all these strange, unexplainable things.
Now, let me ask you this. You brought up an interesting point. Uh, I always say in phenomena, right person, right place at the right time. That's
Mhm.
how people experience paranormal phenomena. Do you feel that perhaps because of an energetic makeup of you or your brothers, do you feel that that had something to do with the fact that you guys could get experiences and the other brothers didn't?
It's possible, though, when I look back to my experiences again at age 2, 4, and 7, it's not like I was meditating at 2 years
Oh
old
no,
or
right,
doing
right.
anything, like, intentionally. I wasn't, trying to reach across the veil or anything like that. I'm just trying to make sense of this crazy world we live in. And so it could be that there's something inherent in my makeup that possibly I inherited. The like my me and my two of my brothers got the gene from my mom, but the other two
Right.
got it from the non-gene or whatever from my dad. Um, I don't know.
Do you think that now in UFO circles, do you feel that experiencers or even those that have multiple sightings, do you think that's something that runs down a family line? Because I know I did this, I did some research into it in the paranormal, and I did find that there was some kind of a correlation to people who were, who actually were able to experience phenomena. Is that the same way in UFO circles?
It is true, it seems sometimes. I'm hesitant I'm hesitant to say most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think in my, pool of people that I know, it seems to be most of the time that it's, brought down from one family member to the other. And one of the things
Wow.
that I say,
Wow.
and it's similar to what you had just said a second ago about right person, right place, right time, is that I think there's three sort of ways to catch the abduction bug, if you will. One is genetically, like for me, like I said, it runs on my mom's side of the family. That's where I
Right.
think I got it.
Right.
And another is if you are around somebody long enough that it is an abductee, you'll at some point an event will happen and you'll be there and you'll be part of it. And once you're in, you're in. You're sucked in, you're pulled in, then you may continue to have these type of experiences based upon your close relation with somebody else that's having it. I've seen that. And then another thing that's interesting that came to me maybe within about the last 10 years is I know two people that are abductees that sold their home, and the person that bought their home was started having experiences. Like there was something that was residual that it affected the people that moved in afterwards.
Almost like a I'm not a big portal guy. Okay, I'm really not. But in this case, do you think that it may have been some kind of energetic center, that Earth energy that may go and act as a beacon?
The best answer is I don't know, but yeah, that's certainly possible. If somehow, I may sound glib at some of the things I
No.
say, and I am truly a lifelong experiencer, and it's up to here in my life, and I absolutely swim in this stuff, so I take it very
Right,
seriously.
right.
But like I said, I don't mean to be glib sometimes, but like say they put like a little tracker in the house, saying like, okay, this is a house where you can come and take the person there, and then the people move out of the house, and that sort of radar station, that little tracker thing or whatever, it may be just at an energy level, or it may be a very physical thing. It's still in the house, and so beings are still coming to the house, thinking that they're going to get somebody that's used to being abducted, and instead there's new tenants, and they're like, oh, what the heck, person's a person. Yeah.
Well, the reason I really have this opens up an entire vein of questioning, because of the fact that people who have had this experience, the abductee experience, seem to have repeat experiences. Is that's
yes.
true in your case, right?
Very true.
Now I have to ask, okay, in the beginning, the first time when you first saw something, it was just there, and I mean, I'm sure at that point your mind was not trained to be logical. It was just raw and open, which is what happens with, like, when you're younger and you see something and it doesn't scare you because people didn't tell you that it's dangerous or you should be scared. When you felt yourself go, what was that like? I mean, when your consciousness looked around and you said, okay, I'm no longer in my house. What was that like? What was that like too?
It's always fearful. And like, this is a story that, if anybody's seen me on anything, I like to give the example of what happened to me when I was 7, because it's a good overall sort of explanation of what it's like. I was 7, and in my bed, there was this black portal that opened up directly over my head. And then this metal cable dropped down and started whipping around really quickly. And it was shooting off some sort of electricity. And I felt drawn. I felt like I was being sucked up. And then the next moment, I knew I was in what I considered to be sort of a mud room on the UFO. This sort of entry, small portal way, not like energy portal, but I'm in this small room, and they're bathing me in this colored light, sort of this bluish purple light that I think is meant to sterilize whatever, but it's just an impression I have. And then the 2 little gray guys that were in the room with me bring me into the next room, and in the next room, there's a slab in the middle of the room, and it looks very medical. So I'm like, okay, this is a medical thing. They're going to want me to go up on this table. And instead, they leave the room. And by this time, the fear is sort of loosening. I'm no longer quite as afraid at this point. There seems to be a moment when you sort of push through, and the absolutely incredible just seems normal. And so anyway, so here I am in this doctor's office, and the 2 little gray guys leave me alone in it. And I'm like, well, that's odd that they should do that. So since they went to the left, I decided to go to the right. And I found myself in this long curving hallway, and I'm just walking, looking around at it. It's not much to see. And then I get to the end of the hallway, and there's a sort of like a closet, and there is like a mechanical thing in there that I just got the impression like, oh, that's like a furnace. Who knows what the heck it was, but in my young mind, that's the impression I got. I turn around and find that 3 little gray guys have been following me pretty much, probably the entire time I was walking down this hallway, just waiting to see what I was going to do. And then they invited me back towards them and ushered me into a room in that hallway where these guys were about 3 feet tall. And then there was a guy who was about 5 feet tall in the room we went in. And in this room, there was a chair, looked kind of like a dentist chair. And this time he did want me to sit in the chair, which I did. And he turns, and he's got these giant, big, black wraparound eyes. And he looks right in my face and says to me telepathically, not with his mouth, but with his mind, says, be really good and you'll get to see the color blue. And here I'm thinking, like, this guy doesn't know kids very well, no sucker, no sticker, what I'll get to see the color blue. Okay, I'm just going with this. And then I felt this really sharp pain in my right arm. And I look down and I see there's a cut on my arm. I don't know what caused it, but I'm watching it heal up right as I look at it. And I look back up at the being, and his face is in mine again. And sure enough, his black eyes switched to a bright blue, like a bright cerulean blue. And it was mesmerizing, tranquilizing. I was just in this state of bliss. And then I woke up the next morning and I look over and there's a scar on my arm. I still have the scar.
Wow.
And
Wow.
there's a slight added part to this, is that I went into later on, I connected with my friend from across the street. He's 6 at the time. We're climbing trees in my backyard when this mist rolls in the backyard. This is the very day after the night that I had this experience. So this is just hours after. And we didn't know what this mist was. We thought maybe something was on fire or whatever, but it was a cool mist, kind of like a fog machine.
Right.
And then I'm out of the tree and I'm standing in the middle of the yard, and this little gray guy comes up to me. He's walking through my backyard and asks me telepathically if I'm okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And then he seemed satisfied. And then he kept walking and the mist followed him. And the mist rolled into the neighbor's yard and through the next neighbor's yard and around the corner and kept going. And my friend didn't see the little being, but he remembers the mist really well. We both remember it to this day. And yeah.
That is amazing because of the fact that you have corroborating evidence because somebody else saw it. That's amazing to me. That's how often does that happen, that somebody else is there when there is a sighting of that nature? Because that's hard. Because I know in paranormal, very seldom. Usually it's always a solo.
It can be solo often. And another thing that happens is that people can be switched off. People in the immediate environment can be switched off. They basically frozen in time. Maybe if they're sleeping, they just can't wake up. The person that's having the experience, like say you're in bed and you see lights and you're hearing noises outside and you're dreading, oh my gosh, here they are again. And then you try to wake up your partner next to you and you shake them and they just don't wake up. The dog's asleep, all sorts of things like that. And so it is a very isolating event quite often.
Right.
Sometimes there are people who are awake and observing and participating in this together. I had an example of that when I was in my 20s, this girl that I was dating, and I'm giving a super edited version of the story here, but we were out in the woods and in a place that was pretty remote, and we suddenly were paralyzed. And yep, 3 little gray guys come out of the woods and they're looking her up and down saying, no, she's no good. She's not the one. She's no good for him, telepathically to each other. And then they leave, and then she and I hightail it out of there. And immediately after, she broke up with me. And while I didn't say that what had happened had anything to do with me, I hadn't sort of come out to her about the stuff yet. It was clear she knew it had everything to do with me.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Now, I have a question. I got a question that just came in. Have you ever had an implant? Have you ever found that somehow that you did have some kind of an implant? And even if not, what's your opinion of all these people that do come up and they say that we have, that they have some kind of an implant and they get them x-rayed and it looks like a BB or sometimes something a little bit different. Tell us about that?
Okay. So, these things that are appearing under people's skin are still mysterious. Some people think that they're tracking devices. Some people think that it records different biologic functions, maybe fine-tunes people in some way to the benefit of the beings that are coming. There's a lot of different theories for it. I have not personally had one myself. And what's kind of funny, for those of you out there who have a metal detector and never thought to try it on your own body, go ahead and give it a go. But yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Bill. You know what I'm going to be doing immediately after the show tonight, right? Thanks.
So one good friend of mine who passed, gosh, about 20 years ago now, David Cadewood was his name, and he was an experiencer.
Yeah.
And he had this X-ray, and sure enough, yeah, he had this little thing down at right
Wow.
in the back of his neck, and he um wanted to have it explored.
Yeah.
He wanted to have it removed, but doctors were like, "No way are we touching that part of your, brain area." So he wanted it removed upon his passing, but that never happened. So, I really think that there is a reality to that happening. There was a guy, Dr. Roger Lear, who's now passed, who made it sort of a high point of his career to go after
Mm-hmm.
these things. And when they're pulled out, um, they seem kind of unremarkable, and they're little bits essentially, and often it's seemingly the case that it's not the implant itself, the
Right.
hard part that's of interest. It's the mucus around it. Something about that interacts with the person is the more interesting aspect of it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Bill, okay, I'm picking your brain left and right. I'm so sorry that I'm doing that, but it's like this is you're so fascinating to speak with. I want to ask you about when was the last time that you experienced an abduction?
Hmm. Like a full-throated abduction.
Yes. Yes.
It was within the last 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
but things have slowed down for me dramatically ever since maybe about the age, I would say about 30. Um,
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my teens, sometimes it would happen more than once a week.
Wow.
When I was in my 20s, maybe every month, a couple months, still quite a bit of activity. And then for the most part, it slowed down. I really think there is a lot to their interest in a young, healthy human body, and then beyond that, there's just sort of checkups. They if you're not giving them something, if you're not useful to them,
Right.
then you're not going to see as much activity. And then the other thing is that I notice people of varying different age groups say that the phenomena has dropped off for them somewhat. There's always fresh new people coming in saying this just happened to me, this just happened to me, but it seems like the traffic has slowed down a little bit. And the really bizarre stories have also tended to slow down. I notice. I'm doing research for a presentation that I'm doing at MUFON's symposium. So I'm looking at these cases from the mid 90s, and I'm like, wow, those were the good old days. There was some really bonkers stuff happening back then that I don't hear nearly as much of nowadays.
Mm-hmm. I think that comes in waves though. It's like it's the same thing with the other communities too, where it peaks and then you'll have just actual I okay, I'm trying to say this as delicately as I possibly can. I'll just throw it out there. In the paranormal circles back in the 80s during the and 90s going into the satanic panic, you had all these really insane stories and all these interviews that were just off the wall. And you were like, oh my God. And even if a tenth of all of these stories were true, you have to sit down and say, wow, that's amazing. And then the curve comes down and it becomes more, and I hate to say use the word believable,
Hmm.
but it's not as so like and I'm circus like where it's not
Hmm.
like wow, you know. And I often wonder if it's like it comes this is purposely done to be in these waves. And now at this time it's a much more calmer
Hmm.
sphere. So I greatly understand that. I greatly understand that. Now, Bill, I want to ask you about fear. The first time I saw like a spirit, a ghost, or whatever, something in my room, I couldn't sleep. I could not sleep for days afterwards.
Mhm.
And then I would sleep with the light on. And my wife will even tell you that to this day, if
Mhm.
she's not in the house, she'll come home and almost every light on the house will be on, except I will
Mhm.
be sleeping. I'll be, I'll be in bed, you know, dreaming. Now, for you, what was it like? Did you have that like that intense fear, and did it take
Mhm.
you a long time to get over it?
Mhm. So in my case, there's a story that goes with it, and I know that I am maybe unique in my journey, and that's a thing
Uh-huh.
about this phenomena, is
Yes,
that
I agree.
um, the beings that are reported can look identical or nearly identical or similar enough, and the craft may be similar enough, and some of the broad strokes of the phenomena similar enough, but
Right.
everybody's unique story is so unique and so different. So for me, yeah, especially in my teens, I kept a bottle of No-Dose in my room, and
Really?
yep, and so whenever something I knew they were there and it was about to happen, or right after it happened, I would take No-Dose. And these are school nights. I was a high school, kid at this time, and I had my room set up as an obstacle course, and just stuff everywhere, and I never had the blinds open because they might be doing a recon. I thought I had a fan blowing on me just in case if I fell asleep and something broke that wind, channel, that I would know it. I would either have the TV or radio on. I would have the lights on, something
I did
blocking
the
the
radio.
door,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did
all
that.
of this stuff. And so I carried that into my early 20s. And then when I would connected with MUFON in 93, and Shirley Coyne, the state director for Michigan MUFON at the time, started doing regressions for me. I went to her place, I think about 6 times. It was six
Wow.
times
I was going
to
to
be
ask you if
regressed.
you had done regressions because I do know that some people have had them done, and they're just absolutely fascinating. The amount of detail that they can pull out.
Oh, for sure. At least in my case, I totally vouch for how useful they can be with the right person doing the regression. So it was my last regression, and I don't know that it was necessarily intended to be my last regression, but so Shirley had me in her office. Her husband was out, and he was laying on the couch just outside of the room. George was his name, and so she starts the regression, like countdown, cool down. I'm relaxing and all this stuff. And then she says, just go to wherever your mind thinks you need to explore. And whenever I tried to focus on something, it got blurred out, sort of blocked, and I couldn't see anything. It was like really weird. It was frustrating. It felt like something was actively blocking me from trying to
Wow.
remember.
Wow.
And then the room started to get brighter and brighter and brighter, and my eyes are closed and I can't open them. But suddenly it was so glaringly white, bright white all around me. And then I noticed that I was much lighter. Like I felt like I had no weight at all to me, and that I was floating in this sort of whiteness. And this voice came to me and it said, "You're concerned about how we come to take you, and you're wondering if we're going to come back and take you. Well, first of all, we'll say you're going to be fine your whole life. And we know this because we can see you in the future as well. And we guarantee you um, that we are going to come back again and again and again and take you."
Wow.
And that's not, you would think, a comforting message. We're going to come back and we're going to come back and we're going to come back. Um, but then the room started to darken and I relaxed back into the chair. Shirley gets up and says, "Oh, we lost you there for a while." Like she thought I fell asleep or something. And my first thought was, I need to go to the bathroom. So they lived in a trailer home, so very thin walls, which becomes important. I'm in the bathroom, and I hear George say to Shirley, her husband, say to her, he's like, there were 3 of them here. And she's like, what? He goes, yeah, they showed up right several minutes after you started your session, and they just left a few minutes ago. And so I guess he was laying there paralyzed on the couch while these 3 grays were in their
That's
home.
amazing.
And
That's
then
amazing.
so I'm in the bathroom hearing them say this, and I come out of the bathroom, and they both have this ashen look on their faces, and I say, "Oh, what's up?" And Shirley's like, "Oh, nothing." I'm like, "I thought I heard you maybe talking about something. I don't know," I said. And Shirley's like, "Oh no, oh no." And then I'm like, "They're denying it?" I'm like, after the experience I had, followed by what they're doing and saying, I'm like, I think I'm going to go. And I just walked out the door, drove off, and that was my last session with them. But when I got home and it was time for me to go to sleep, when I laid down, I'm like, I don't need the TV on. I don't need the radio on. I don't need to block the door or keep the windows shut. I was relaxed. Somehow, what they did, what they said, doesn't make sense to me how it worked. It doesn't make sense to me how it worked. But ever since then, I've been able to sleep with the lights off and
Wow.
without anything else on.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That is so
weird.
amazing. That's amazing. Bill, we're almost out of time. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and where you're going to be, because I'm going to tell you what, Bill, this has been a fascinating, quick hour for me. And everybody that has ever heard you speak has always been riveted. Tell everybody how they can get a hold of you and find out what's going on and where they can buy your books.
Sure. So I am the state director for the Michigan chapter of the Mutual UFO Network, something I've done since 2004. So I'm an easy target if you look for me through MUFON, either MUFON.com, the international site, or through Michigan MUFON, MIMUFON.org, our state site. Coming up, Michigan MUFON has a conference, a mini conference on May 2nd in the afternoon. 3 great speakers. We have Nicole Lynn, whom you know, and also Jack Bushong, the radar operator from the March 8th, 1994 event, and Ray
Wow.
Shemansky talking about the 1966 event. And beyond that, summer has me talking all over the place. The next big thing beyond that is the MUFON Symposium itself, which is MUFON's big conference. That's in Covington, Kentucky at the end of August. You can go to MUFONsymposium.com to find out more about that. My 2 books that you so kindly mentioned are on Amazon, I think Walmart, Barnes & Noble's site, things like that.
Fantastic. Bill, thank you so much. I'm humbled that you came on tonight. I'm really so thrilled that you're here. Fascinating. You've given me personally a lot of great material for thought. Now, and you know I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. I'm just gonna tell you that now. Just gonna warn you. So I may be calling you up later, but stay on the line so I can thank you properly off air, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Bill, for being here.
Always good seeing you, Tim.
Fascinating. It was a fascinating evening. I have been waiting like a little schoolgirl. I'm a fanboy. What can I tell you? It was tonight was that interesting because this is something that I want to go and broaden my horizons. I need to open my eyes up a little bit more to all the possibilities out there, and the possibility of contact and ETs and all of this is all part of the big ball. It's one big ball of wax. So guys, don't go and discount anything. Everything is possible. You've been listening to Tim Shaw right here on What Else? The Black Cat Lounge. Take care, guys. I appreciate everybody being here. Be kind, be safe, and stay healthy. Ciao, babies. Bye-bye.